The chosen Season 6 trailer has arrived, and the official synopsis that accompanies it contains the most precise description of the Passion story ever written for a television production. The Sanhedrin calls it justice, the Romans call it peace, and the followers call it murder. Those 3 sentences, 12 words in total, are the entire architecture of Season 6, and understanding what they mean for how the show is going to tell the story of Good Friday is the key to understanding why the trailer landed with the force that it did. Over 4,500 comments appeared on the YouTube page within 24 hours of the trailer's release, and most of them were written by people who were crying before the footage even began. How does the show intend to depict 3 simultaneous realities about the same event without betraying any of them? Will the season give Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin enough genuine screen time that their case, however wrong, feels coherent rather than cartoonish? Does Pontius Pilate's designation as a figure of Roman peace tell the audience that Andrew James Allen's portrayal of the prefect is going to be something more morally complex than the hand-washing villain the story usually produces? How does the show reconcile the disciples' experience of watching a murder with the theological framework that the series has been building since its first episode, in which every viewer knows the story does not end on Friday? What did Jonathan Roumie's filming experience in Matera, Italy, which he has called the hardest thing he has ever done in his life, both professionally and personally, actually do to the footage that the trailer is only beginning to show? And does the revelation that Season 7's premiere is also going to be a theatrical event alongside the Season 6 finale change how the audience should understand what the show is building toward in its last 2 chapters? Every one of those questions has an answer, and this breakdown covers all of them. The single most important sentence in the entire Season 6 promotional campaign is not, "Father, forgive them," though that line, heard at the trailer's close, over Jonathan Roumie's bloodied face, is the most emotionally devastating moment in any chosen promotional footage ever released. The most important sentence is the middle one. Romans call it peace. That designation is the show's most politically sophisticated framing of the Passion story, and it reframes Pontius Pilate in a way that most depictions of the Crucifixion have never attempted at the level of an official synopsis. The Romans did not execute Jesus because they hated him. They executed him because allowing a man who drew enormous crowds and spoke about a kingdom to continue operating in an occupied territory was a threat to the administrative stability of the province. For Rome, Good Friday was not a day of cruelty, it was a day of order restored. Andrew James Allen's Pilate in the trailer appears in the footage before a large crowd, the same crowd that chose Barabbas, the same crowd that the Gospels depict as calling for crucifixion. However, unfortunately, the evidence from how The Chosen has always depicted institutional power, never as purely malevolent but as the machinery of human systems operating within their own logic, tells the audience that Season 6 is going to give Pilate enough genuine complexity that his designation as a peacekeeper lands as something other than sarcasm. The show appears to be building toward a Pilate who genuinely believes he has made the most reasonable decision available to him under circumstances that offered no good options, and that belief, in the context of what the disciples standing nearby are experiencing, is the moral center of the season's most challenging dramatic question. The most likely explanation for why the Sanhedrin's perspective gets equal billing in the synopsis is the one that Dallas Jenkins has been preparing the audience for since Season 1. The Chosen has never depicted the religious authorities as one-dimensional obstacles to Jesus' ministry. It has given them coherent theological frameworks, genuine fears about Roman retribution, and real concerns about the stability of a Jewish community living under occupation. Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, watching a man claim divine authority and draw massive crowds toward him in a politically volatile moment, are not simply bad men choosing evil. They are men operating within a religious system that has kept their people alive for centuries, making a calculation that the system has precedent for. Better that one man die than that the whole nation be destroyed. The evidence from the Season 6 synopsis placing that perspective as its first word, the Sanhedrin calls it justice, tells the audience that the show intends to honor the coherence of that calculation even as it depicts the catastrophic wrongness of its conclusion. However, unfortunately, honoring the coherence of the Sanhedrin's reasoning is the single most difficult thing a show about Jesus can attempt, because any dramatization that makes their argument feel genuinely reasonable risks making the audience momentarily wonder whether they are wrong. And that moment of doubt is the thing that makes the crucifixion feel like what it actually was, rather than the thing that makes it feel like a story with a predetermined villain. The evidence from how The Chosen has always trusted its audience with moral complexity tells the audience that Season 6 is not going to simplify this. And the Nicodemus storyline, confirmed by Dallas Jenkins at ChosenCon, is the clearest signal yet about what that means in practice. The theory that changes what Season 6's depiction of the Sanhedrin actually looks like comes directly from Jenkins' confirmed episode details, and they reframe the institutional storyline in a way that the trailer alone cannot convey. Jenkins confirmed to subscribers of Peter Chataway's Substack newsletter that Episode 2 will show Peter and John outside the high priest's courtyard before the trial of Jesus begins, placing two of the disciples closer to the institutional machinery of the arrest and trial than the Gospels typically depict them. And in Episode 4 or 5, Nicodemus, the Pharisee who came to Jesus at night in Season 1, and whose arc across 5 seasons has been the show's most sustained exploration of what it costs a member of the religious establishment to believe, will summon Big James to the Sanhedrin, hoping that James's testimony can get Jesus released. That storyline is not in any gospel. It is Jenkins and his writers finding the human dimension of the institutional story, a man on the inside of the system that is about to execute the person he has been moving toward spiritually for 5 seasons, using whatever leverage he has left to try to stop it. The evidence from how The Chosen has always used Nicodemus as the figure who bridges the world of religious power and the world of genuine faith tells the audience that his Episode 4 or 5 scene is going to be one of the most emotionally complex scenes in the entire series. Big James testifying to the Sanhedrin about what he witnessed, with Nicodemus listening and Caiaphas presiding, while Jesus is somewhere else in the building being treated the way the trailer shows him being treated. That is the kind of scene that The Chosen exists to create. But the theory that carries the most weight for what Season 6 actually delivers on screen is the one about what happened in Matera, Italy, and why the footage it produced is unlike anything the show has ever captured before. Jonathan Roumie gave several interviews at ChosenCon in Charlotte in February 2026 about the 3 weeks of Crucifixion filming in June 2025, and the specific details he disclosed are the context the audience needs to carry into every trailer frame that shows his face. He told Fox News Digital that filming the Crucifixion was the hardest thing he has ever done in his life, not just professionally but personally as a human being. He told UT News that for the first few months after filming, simply attending Mass was enough to make him weep, and that even now thinking about the experience causes emotion that he cannot fully contain. He described to Reverend Mike Schmitz at ChosenCon the specific moment before the Via Dolorosa sequence, the Way of the Cross, the carrying of the crossbeam, when one of the Italian men playing a Roman soldier, a man who had experienced a resurgence in his own faith in recent years, had to punch Roumie in the stomach as part of the scene. The soldier came over to Roumie afterward, in tears, and said he was sorry. That moment, a man whose faith had been renewed weeping over a reenactment that his own hands participated in, is the kind of thing that does not exist in a performance. However, unfortunately for the distance that separates art from reality, Roumie did not leave it in the scene. He sustained a head injury during filming that left cervical issues lasting months afterward. He told Schmitz that his approach shifted across the 3 weeks from acting the Passion to offering the Passion, choosing to act less and allow the physical reality of what the role demanded to become a genuine act of prayer and sacrifice. The evidence strongly suggests that what the camera captured in those 3 weeks in Matera is not performance in any conventional sense. It is something that exists in the space between art and act, and the trailer, as devastating as it already is, has only shown the audience the smallest fraction of it. While the Passion narrative and Roumie's experience dominate the discussion around the Season 6 trailer, there is another dimension of the season that every fan needs to understand before November arrives, and it belongs to the production decision that makes Season 6 unlike any season of television The Chosen has ever made. Dallas Jenkins did not structure Season 6 as 6 episodes ending with a finale. He structured it as 5 episodes, followed by a theatrical event that serves simultaneously as the Season 6 finale and, in a revelation that arrived alongside the Season 7 announcement, as the gateway to Season 7's theatrical premiere. The Season 6 finale arrives in cinemas on March 12, 2027. Season 7's premiere arrives in theaters on March 31, 2028, exactly 1 year later. Both of the final chapters of this story are going to be theatrical events, not streaming episodes. Jenkins confirmed at ChosenCon that Season 7 will include the Ascension and the events that follow, moving from resurrection through to the beginning of Acts. The evidence from that structure tells the audience something specific about what the theatrical finale of Season 6 is meant to accomplish. It is not simply a feature-length episode of a streaming series. It is the pivot point of a 7-season story, the moment the narrative turns from the darkness of Good Friday toward the light of everything that follows, and the first image of what Season 7 will have to carry. The evidence strongly suggests that Jenkins designed the theatrical finale specifically to hold a moment that cannot be adequately experienced on a streaming service, in a living room, on a Sunday evening. He needs the audience in the dark, together, without a phone in their hand, for the most important scene in the entire series. The secondary thread that Season 6 has been building toward since the very first episode of the show, the one that Jenkins has confirmed is the most anticipated moment in the entire 7-season run, belongs to Mary Magdalene. Elizabeth Tabish's portrayal of Mary Magdalene is the emotional spine of The Chosen, in a way that the ensemble structure sometimes obscures, but never diminishes. The show began with Jesus speaking her name and setting her free. The show is going to end, in Season 7, with the risen Jesus speaking her name again at the tomb. The perfect dramatic circle, the full arc of a story about what it means to be seen and known and called by name. Season 6 is the season that carries Mary from the Last Supper through the arrest, the trial, the scourging, the Via Dolorosa, the crucifixion, and the burial, the complete darkness that precedes that final dawn. The trailer shows Mary Magdalene in the crowd, watching Pilate, present but unable to intervene, exactly where the Gospels place her. The evidence from the show's commitment to Mary Magdalene as its emotional through line tells the audience that Tabish's performance in Season 6 will be the thread the audience holds on to across the most painful episodes, and the evidence from how Jenkins has described the anticipated emotional impact of the Season 7 resurrection scene suggests that every tear Season 6 costs, the audience will make that moment feel like exactly what it is. After everything the trailer has shown and everything the confirmed production and storyline details have revealed, the question every fan is holding is the simplest and most urgent. How far away is November 15th, and is the audience prepared for what arrives when it gets there? The Chosen Season 6 premieres exclusively on Prime Video on November 15th, 2026, with the first 3 episodes releasing simultaneously. Episode 4 follows on November 22nd, Episode 5 on November 29th, and Episode 6 on December 6th. The theatrical finale, The Chosen, Crucifixion, arrives in cinemas worldwide on March 12, 2027. Season 7, the series finale, is expected in theaters on March 31, 2028. This is not simply the next season of a streaming show. This is the beginning of the end of a story that started as the most successful crowd-funded media project in history and has become something that hundreds of millions of people across every continent have described as a personal encounter with the person at its center. Based on what the trailer has shown, based on what the 3 weeks in Matera produced, and based on what Jonathan Roumie carried home in his body and his spirit from those weeks of filming, what arrives on November 15th is going to be unlike anything this audience has ever watched. Dallas Jenkins said, "There are moments of pure joy in Season 6 that the audience would not expect from a season about the crucifixion." The evidence from everything else he has said about this season suggests that those moments exist specifically to make what surrounds them feel as heavy as it deserves to feel. Now the conversation moves to the fans. 3 questions need answering before November 15th. Dallas Jenkins confirmed that Nicodemus summons Big James to testify before the Sanhedrin in episode 4 or 5. Does that testimony have any effect on the trial's outcome, or does the scene exist specifically to show Nicodemus exhausting every internal option available to him before being forced to watch the system he is part of do the thing he spent 5 seasons trying to believe it would not do? Roumie described shifting from performing the Passion to offering it as a genuine spiritual act. Does that shift produce a portrayal that is more or less emotionally accessible to viewers who come to the show without a personal faith? And can the weight that the performance carries be received by an audience who receives it differently than it was given? And the question that the twin theatrical events of seasons 6 and 7 make most significant, when the audience sits in a cinema on March 12, 2027, and watches the Crucifixion of Jesus in a Dallas Jenkins production with Jonathan Roumie in the role he has inhabited for 7 years, is the experience they are having the one that 7 seasons of television built them to receive, or is it something that exceeds what any amount of preparation could have made them ready for? The video on screen covers everything else fans need to know before season 6 arrives.